Looks to be about 3'3". Today we're making a horse height measuring stick that you can also use on your dog. Right, Zeus? Let's get on with it. Alright, we are making a measuring stick today. This is going to be a very easy build. I'm not going to get into it too far because there really isn't much to get into, and that's the best part of it in my opinion. It's also quite economical as we were just using PVC pipe to make this happen. So let's take a look at that. I have here a 10-foot length of 3/4 inch PVC, and I can only buy it in 10-foot lengths, so that's what we got, which is fine. I've cut it at 6 feet for the measuring height part, and I'll cut another 2-footer to come across that will measure the horse at the withers. For the slidey part, we just grab a T. These 3/4 inch T's are fantastic. The only problem is that they don't slide down very far, so that's one of the first things we need to do is get this thing a little bit hollowed out so that it'll fit over top. Otherwise it won't slide, it'll just stick on the end. If you've never worked with PVC, this is how it works. You stick it on the end really hard, glue it, and it stays together and you've got water. Otherwise, we'll never get it on. So let's get on with that. Okay, so for the T itself, if you see inside, you can see a little lip in there. And that little lip is what stops the pipe from going any further, so it doesn't go all the way through. But we actually want it to go all the way through. And in fact, here is my finished piece, and you'll see here is a finished piece where I have essentially filed down and drilled out, dremeled out all of the extra material that's in there. Here's a non-finished piece. You can see that there. So that's what we would do, is take out that little bit in there. Okay, so the way that I did it was I used a Dremel, which is a brand name for a rotary tool like this, where when you turn it on, it spins. This bit here, which is just a little basic cutting bit, and inside of there is where we'll put this to just start to shave it out. Okay, so we'll see that's already starting to shave down. This doesn't take too long. I'm not going to finish this one on camera because we've already got one. But that's how I went about doing this. It's about a 10-minute job. If you don't have one of these tools, that's no problem. You can also use a file, like a round file. So you can see the profile on this is round. And then you just take that and just take your time grinding down the edges and the extra material that's in there. So this is what our finished piece does look like. And what I did when I was working on this was I steadily sanded it and ground it down and filed it down, kind of idea. And I just kept testing it to see what the fit was. Now the fit here is a little bit, it's got a little bit of friction to it. And that's good, that's what we want. We want to have some movement, but a little bit of friction. And it's just a trial and error thing. I wouldn't say there's anything specific to talk about. But once that's done, it fits over top, slides rather, nicely, then we can move on to the next step. So our next step is to measure our PVC pipe. Now, PVC pipe has two different kinds of ends. There's this end here, which hopefully you can make out is just a normal end. And then if I flip it over, we can see the other end has a connector. So essentially you would be able to connect another piece of pipe to this. I'm going to keep this end as my bottom piece and measure 6 feet from here. Now before I cut this, I just thought I'd explain these little cutters first, but they are pipe cutters and they are ratchets right here that when you squeeze, give it a good squeeze there, and when you squeeze enough, it'll go to the next ratchet spot. So we'll cut, and then it'll come up and it'll catch on the next one. And then you're just continuously sort of squeezing it. And my blades are a little dull because I've been using this for so long, so it's making sort of that cracking sound. But most of the time this is just cut through like butter. So anyways, we're gonna give this a cut. Ooh, and we're done. So we've got our 6-foot piece cut. We need to cut our 2-foot piece for the cross piece that's going to rest on the horse's withers and give us a measurement on the stick. Now, we want to cut 2 feet more off of the original piece of 10 foot, which is going to be about half of this here. Now, actually, I thought I would also introduce how these things reset in case you happen to buy a set and think that's a great idea. You'll make a whole bunch and sell them all over the place. But what you have to do, just remember it, where I need to cut that, is you just pull them apart like that and they're reset. That's it. Okay, I know I'm cutting here. You know, another little tiny trick is actually, if I know this thing's 4 feet long, so if I can balance this on my finger, then I'll know where the halfway point is. Right there. It doesn't actually have to be perfect. We just squeeze and it ratchets and we're done. Let's assemble this thing. Obviously this piece goes on here and then this piece goes there and you're done. Last thing to do is to mark this thing up. Let's talk about that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is measure out the height measurements on this post. Now, the funny thing about this is that horses are measured in hands, and one hand being 4 inches. Now, my hands are 3 3/4 or so, but the measurement is 4 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure every 4 inches, and that's going to be one hand. So as we work our way up, we should get to the more normal heights, anywhere between usually 13 and 18 or so. So let's do that. So before we start measuring out all of our marks that we're going to use to measure a horse's height, we have to keep in mind that this sleeve here, the way I'm building this, will actually hide any marks underneath it. So we have to decide if I'm going to make marks to measure from the bottom of this T or the top of this T. Now I've decided that I want to measure from the bottom. So what we're going to do is figure out the exact amount of distance from the end of the T to the pipe bottom. This is going to be the bottom of the pipe essentially, and it looks to be 1 inch. So we got to keep that in mind when we figure out our first measurement to then build the rest of them. So the first one we're going to do is going to be 3 inches, and then from there we can do all the rest. For marking this, I'm just going to use a permanent marker, and we're going to mark our first spot right here at 3 inches. So that is one hand. If we wanted to measure a cat, maybe a gerbil, that'd be a good one to start with. All right, so from there we can measure 4 inches. To get this done precisely, I'm going to use the measuring tape at its full length. You could try to maybe make a piece that's 4 inches and sort of mark it like that, but I think it would be much more precise if you used a measuring tape the whole length of the way. So if we're starting at 3 inches, we know that the next one is going to be 7. which is, whoops, which is right here. And then the next one up from that, 4 inches up, is going to be 11, and then 15, 43, 47, 67, and what the heck, 71. For the next step, I decided that I wanted to be able to see all the measurements from any side of this thing. I didn't have to be on one side at all. So to do that, I'm just taking the T and I'm going to each mark. Here's this next one. And I'm just tracing around it like this. Well, I've marked up the whole post, and the last thing to do is to start putting numbers on. So for the very last step of this, I'm going to put in single inch markers for the most common hands height horses that we would have. So from 13 probably up to 18 is going to be appropriate. And that's no problem. We can just tick our way along until we have them all done. Okay, we're here with Luke, and I want to measure him because I think he's the easiest one to measure, but all he wants to do is play since I got in here. So let's see how this goes. So the thing we need to do is come up to this high point of his withers, and or the highest point of his withers. I have to kind of walk around because I don't have a halter with him at the moment, and he keeps following me around trying to sniff or something. We'll put this down near his feet. This will end up at the top of the withers, making sure it's not on any kind of angle whatsoever. And then we just take the measurement, which is 15, 2.5 or so. We'll call him 15.3. He says, scratch my butt. And that is how you build a measuring stick and then measure your horse's height. Done deal. Pretty simple, cheap, effective, easy to carry around, will never rot. It's not made out of wood, and should work for most applications. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next video.